Welcome back to part 3 of A Culture of Risk-Taking for Teachers and Students. In part 1 and 2, we looked at aspects of what teacher risk-taking is all about. Now we're going to dive in and look at aspects of student risk-taking in the classroom. The big question is why? Why is it important for our students to take risk? Well, it moves them to a higher level of thinking. They're never going to extend their thinking or use their thinking for their passions and things they want to learn about if we don't allow them to take those risks. Now, that doesn't mean this is going to happen all the time, but you need to make sure you allow room for them to extend their thinking. And it creates an educated, communicative speaker. Our students need to learn how to speak, whether it's on Zoom, through video, in person, to a crowd, to a classroom. They need to be well communicative speakers. And then this allows more real-world experiences. For example, I gave my students a project for Black History Month. They went and did their research based on their interests, then chose their person. They created their project, but they also knew that as they created this project centered around the person they chose, that they were going to have a global audience. So they were going to be sharing this with other feeder patterns in the district. So it gave them the real world experience to create and publish something, but it also prepared them for the workforce because you're going to be asked all the time to create things or do things and think outside the box. And it kept them engaged. And because I gave them a specific audience, they knew more how to target their creativity and their product towards that audience. So I'm sure we've all seen the iceberg photo, but have we looked at it through the eyes of student success before? So we need to normalize with students that failure is the secret to success. It can also be the confirmation of disappointment and not being able to make it, which is, I think, what students focus on the most is the failure aspect. But it's all in their mindset, which is what we as teachers can help them shift. That is part of our job. So if we're taking risk and shifting our mindset, then our students are going to see that and start mimicking that as well. So how you look at failure determines the outcome. If I determine my failure as pass or fail instead of did I grow, then that kind of sets the tone and determines the outcome of my thinking. So fear of failure cripples the student, but by making room for failure, it can create that I can culture, that growth mindset culture. So when teachers create an atmosphere of it's safe to take a risk and fail, all you need to do is just get up and try again, then they are motivating students to continue to try until they get it right. We have to lead by example. If we want praise for taking risk, we need to do that for our students. Again, it all comes full circle. You're not always going to see the difficult aspects of taking a risk and kind of getting out of your comfort zone, and neither are your students until they try it, reflect, and try again. So by rewarding not just the result, but the process also, a safe environment is presented to your students. So we should be praising them for their hard work and their determination, not necessarily did you make an A or a D. If we're doing this, the student is prepared to take a risk. For example, put their hand up to answer a question because they know it's a safe environment. They know that classmates won't laugh at a wrong answer because they know the teacher is not going to react negatively towards the child. So it's all in how we communicate that risk-taking to students. So let's take a moment to authentically reflect on our own teaching practices and risk-taking. So I want you to think about what risk are your students taking? What risks did they take this year? How many of your students are taking risk? Is it just your GT pre-AP or is it all of your students? And then if your students aren't taking risk, what can you do to help foster the risk-taking in your classroom? Last time I asked you, what risk are you going to take in your classroom? This time I'm turning it to students. So, what risk are your students going to take in the classroom? And how will you make this happen? What will you do to set the example and model risk taking for your students? Thank you so much for joining me for a culture of risk taking for teachers and students.